Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our live art webinar. Today, the topic is very exciting and very current. So we're speaking about AI and creativity. And I have two wonderful guests with me today, Sasha Stiles, who is a wonderful poet, artist, and a friend, and Vishal Kumar, who's been also working with AI for a very long time now and has come up with some exciting hardware tool that I cannot wait to learn more about. Just as a quick introduction for those of you who are just joining Live Art Talks, Live Art is a Web3 platform for art. We work with all different kinds of art, traditional and digital, bring it to Web3 audiences. Right now is a very exciting time for us to speak about AI because we are releasing our own AI agent very soon. We also have a database of a very extensive database of auction results. So now this database is going to be much easier for you to explore using this AI agent. So I cannot wait to share more about it, but I think it's very timely. So without further ado, I want to go to my guests, to Sasha and Vishal. So maybe we can start with a little bit about your background and what got you to Web3, something about your journeys into art and Web3, and anything else that you want to add for your own introductions. So Sasha, maybe you want to start?
Sure, I'm happy to. Thank you so much for bringing us together. Thanks for having us, and looking forward to this chat. Well, as you said in your kind introduction, I'm a poet and artist who does a lot of work with technology, but my background is actually fairly conventional, I guess, in some ways. I studied language and literature, throughout my school days, and really consider myself a writer first and foremost. I've been, writing poems and essays and creative fiction for as long as I can remember. And I have always really been drawn to topics that have to do with science fiction and sort of speculative futures. When I was younger, I just sort of devoured a lot of sci-fi and nonfiction, and I've always been very interested in sort of thinking into the deep future. So, all of that really has infused my work for a long time. I've also been incredibly sort of interested in the intersection of word and image, and really grew up very influenced by text-based artists who I think are, very interestingly aligned with technologies, and especially communications technologies, in really interesting ways. So all of this has sort of come together, and over the years, I found myself increasingly writing poems that were about technology, about my relationship to technology as a theme, but also increasingly utilizing technology as a medium, as the page that I was writing on, as the pen itself, really playing with how I could use all of the media that are at my fingertips to play with words, to kind of expand the boundaries of what I was sort of taught to think that poetry is and should be, and really, just sort of bring words off the page and into this sort of multimodal transmedia existence that we all have these days. And that's led me, to create multimedia poetry that exists, both as things that you might encounter on your phone screen, or that you might walk through in an immersive environment, for example, generative poetry that is sort of a living, breathing text that is always sort of changing and adapting to its reader and its environment. And also, of course, working with artificial intelligence and looking at how natural language processing, in particular, how large language models, can really teach me as a writer about language, about cognition, about creativity, how I can really just sort of use these tools to augment my own skills and imagination as a human writer. And I've been really fascinated, really, in just all that that the collaboration with the Machinic Mind has opened for me. It's really been revelatory, and I've been working since about 2018, really intensively sort of taking my lifetime of human writings and research and, you know, all the things that really kind of make me who I am as a poet, using that to fine tune, to customize language models and sort of create bespoke alter egos that are powered by machine learning, and that really sort of bring together, you know, all of the really exciting opportunities that technological innovation sort of represents. And I'm you know, excited to dig more into that as we go forward. But yeah, all of that has sort of come together in this moment where, you know, I'm able to use blockchain as a mode of publishing, sharing some of this rather unconventional literature, digging deeper into artificial intelligence and how it can now not only allow me to, you know, to write text, but also to write images, to write video, to write voice and spoken word. So really just I'm finding it fascinating, and yeah, just extremely sort of excited about the moment that we're in, and all that it, you know, offers us.
For sure. No, it is fascinating. And I've been watching your journey for several years now, and I'm amazed how far you actually went with your art. Yeah, and the art is beautiful.
Thank
So
you.
great. All right. Vishal, do you want to share a few words about yourself? I know we've met, I think, in person last at Sotheby's quite a few years ago. So, yeah, if you can maybe start there, and how
Yeah,
did it go after that?
sure. Yeah, no, thanks for having me on as well. I'm Vishal, CEO, co-founder of the Alice Camera. I have been working in the art world, the creative industries, like formally for over 10 years now. I studied economics at school and then moved into data science. And then my first job out of university, out of college, was at Sotheby's Auction House, where I worked as a data scientist at Sotheby's. And I was there for quite some time. I was doing data science really, really early on. This was sort of like 2014, 2015, 16. Um, at Sotheby's, mostly in business development. So I was mostly using data science and data analytics and data visualization to win business for Sotheby's in the sort of business development strategy department. I was also building out digital products. And around that time as well, I was also experimenting with early forms of like digital art. There was a tool called Processing and P5JS that people were using. Processing had a really vibrant community at the time. I was going and seeing some of really early sort of generative art being made by people like Mario Klingemann and Anna Ridler and people like this. This was happening like way before the pandemic in 2017. So I was always intellectually curious by all of that stuff, I would say, whilst I was working at Sotheby's, and even attempted to make a few works of digital art myself using that sort of language. So in addition to all of that, on the side, as a sort of like, on the side of my job, I was producing a lot of content. I was making a bunch of content talking about my role as a data scientist in the art market. I was writing a lot on Medium. I was making videos on Instagram and YouTube, even sort of giving a lot of lectures about my work. I had a lecture series called Data Science for Art and Culture that I actually still give today, and managed to build a modest following on social media just around my job and my brand as an art market data scientist. So I was branding myself as a cultural data scientist, and have seen a lot of the waves that have happened. As I mentioned before, the early sort of digital art wave, moving into the NFT Web3 wave. We're now very much in the generative art, generative AI phase. It's gonna, constantly evolve and adapt. And in some ways, generative AI and Web3 are kind of coming together. I've as part of doing all of that, I was very interested in, and the core theme across all of my career is I'm very interested in the combination and the integration of machine learning and creativity. and how can AI, ML, deep learning, and creativity come together? What's the sort of future of that? And I'm really interested in building tools to help people, creatives, use the latest and greatest AI technology. And my thesis has sort of changed over time, but one of my big picture stories right now is I don't think that the future of AI is just a software story. I think that hardware is a really important, plays in a really important role in the future of AI, because it's not just, the future of AI is not just going to be about software. It's going to be about how that software is run on purpose-built hardware to allow those models to not only perform efficiently, but to also open up new human-computer interactions. And one of my sort of ideas at the moment is that I think that hardware is a mediator between the AI, and the AI can be in the cloud, it can also be local, and the hardware is the mediator between the AI and the human. And I think we're going to start to see some really interesting and novel hardware products being introduced to the market. Just to show the audience, this is what we're building. We're building a camera that attaches to your smartphone. It is a professional camera, so think like Sony or Canon camera, but your phone is the sort of screen of the camera. The camera itself has AI compute, so it has electronics that are AI enabled, but it also leverages cloud-based AI to do interesting things as well. So we can talk about the sort of local versus cloud architecture as well. So that's a sort of whistle-stop tour about me. I'm sure we can dive deeper into certain aspects.
And this is so interesting. I cannot wait for you to demo this. So maybe before that, just to go with our flow. So I think one important thing that has been on the table for a while now with AI is how the role of the artist is changing today with all the AI tools available and with the way the artists are using AI. So from my own perspective as a curator and as a person who puts together a lot of artist collaborations, I see that artists, it's all about AI right now. It's very hard to find a digital artist who is not using AI these days. But I think also from working with the artist, the way the artist can be working with AI can be very different. So some people just take it very literally, and they just use the tools to produce art, and that's kind of the end of it. The others think about it very, very extensively. They use a number of tools. They curate the works that are being produced very, very carefully. So, Sasha, as an artist, what's your take on that? And are there any, I don't know, guidelines of what the AI art works best, I guess, from your perspective? And anything around that?
Yeah, I mean, it has been so extraordinary to see this and live through and experience this explosion in adoption of this tool. I mean, Vishal, I know you've been working with AI for quite some time. I really, I've been sort of researching and studying and interested in all this for ages and ages, and really sort of to get my hands, into it a little bit, earlier on as well. Definitely before the pandemic. And at least, at that moment, it felt like a rather lonely pursuit. I think for me, as someone who is also one foot in the writing world, one foot in the art world, there's still, an extraordinary skepticism and hostility towards AI in writing, much more so, I think, than in the world of digital art. So it's been very interesting to sort of be experiencing all these different sort of reactions to, and yeah, it's made me sort of think about using the tool in lots of different ways. But I guess I would start by saying that, of course, AI, we're sort of using the term as though it is like, a discrete thing, like a concrete thing. But AI is to me, it's more sort of a mode of perception and kind of a way of perceiving the world around us than it is, a gadget or a platform or a particular interface. AI is certainly not a monolith. I mean, it encompasses so many different disciplines and approaches. And I think, just the vastness of that is sometimes hard to comprehend. So it's easy to kind of equate AI with, for example, with Midjourney or ChatGPT or something like that. But that is certainly just a very small sort of, window into what AI is, what it can do, what it can offer you. I think, for me, what I really sort of appreciate about it is the way that it sort of complements the things that I'm already sort of thinking about and wanting to do as an artist or as a writer. The way that it's sort of helping to take some impulses or instincts or little seeds of ideas that I have, and then sort of, put them into the system and kind of allow them to flourish and grow in ways that they wouldn't otherwise be able to. And sometimes that means, using a very simple off-the-shelf tool and kind of seeing where that leads. Sometimes it involves, much more sort of conceptual thinking and, really kind of diving into more of the existential considerations of, why use AI. And I think for me, the joy is really kind of bouncing back and forth between all those different levels of it. To sort of define AI art and approaches is very difficult. But I was recently, Elena, I know you know this, I was recently at a very interesting conference with fellow artists and curators and gallerists and just really interesting sort of thought leaders who were talking quite a lot about digital art and blockchain and AI. And I believe it was Christian Paul was sort of helping us define, what AI art is, Christian from the Whitney Museum. And I wish I had the exact description here to read. I don't, so I'll paraphrase, but it had something to do with the idea that the art is not just about using the tools, not just about using, AI techniques or interfaces or processes, but was also engaging with the sort of intentionality of why use AI, or what does the integration of machine learning or intelligent systems into the work, what does it do, what does it say? And so there's a level of it that's also about the artist kind of thinking critically and self-reflexively and deeply about what it means to be working in collaboration with a machine. And that's always been really deeply baked into my practice and my approach, is really sort of always this meta layer of, what can I learn about myself as a writer by writing with a machine that is designed to write like a human? What does it mean to be using a system that really is meant to sort of translate words, natural language into other mediums, other art forms. And so that leads me in so many different directions, but it's sort of an endlessly fascinating kind of loop to sort of be working really, really closely and really, getting into the fine details, getting your hands dirty, really kind of getting into the nitty gritty of prompting and creating data sets and all that, but then also to kind of take this step back and look at what it really means in a larger sense, what AI is sort of telling us about this moment that we're in, but also what does it illuminate about the history of human imagination? What does it say to us about the way that humanity has always sort of been evolved by our technological inventions? So, thinking about it kind of in the context of things like the invention of perspective, the arrival of the camera. For me, I always think about it also in context of, the development of the printing press and the distribution of literature in that medium. So, again, I think it can be all these things. It can be, playing with DALL-E, or it can be playing with Suno or any of these tools, but it can also sort of be thinking in these much bigger ways about what it means for human imagination to sort of be working in concert with these systems that have the ability to perceive things and show us things, all that we as analog humans aren't able to perceive on our own. So from the micro to the macro, I think all of it really does fall into this, under this umbrella of what it means to sort of be creating with artificial intelligence.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much, Sasha. Yeah, it's interesting how complex the AI or the use of AI, in fact, is. Unlike I think a lot of people think when they judge it very quickly. I think this is very important. Vishal, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, echoing a fair amount of what Sasha has been saying, but maybe rephrasing it in a slightly different way, which is that, you know, there's always these technological milestones across the arc of human history, right? And so you had, you know, the printing press and the hammer and a whole bunch of other technologies. And in some ways, the tool doesn't even matter. And in some ways, the outcome or the output of the artist matters, obviously, because that output's going to stand the test of time. You know, there is a painting that was made by Leonardo, and we see the output of his work. But like, actually, it's the concepts and it's the ideas that the artist, the artist has, and the commentary that the artist is trying to have in that moment in time about society at that moment in time. And there will be different tools that the artist will draw upon in that period of time to tell that story and to have that commentary and to manifest that idea or that concept that they have. And so in a way, yes, today you can use Suno, or like tomorrow you can use Runway, but like in a way the tool doesn't necessarily matter. It's more like, what's the concept that the artist has, and what's the story that the artist is trying to tell, not only people today but people of the future, about how what was life like in 2025, what was some of the big tussles that society was going through, what was the sort of you know, I think that's like a bit more of an abstract conceptual take, but I think the tool will always refine, and it has to be said that the tools that artists have at their disposal today in the form of generative AI are pretty mind-blowing. They're pretty wild. They're pretty crazy. I don't think we've ever seen tools and technologies that operate in this way, actually in a sort of like very humanistic way. A lot of people are talking about the anthropomorphism of AI. And so maybe the story is not, can I make a work of art look like a classic work of art? Maybe the story is, what does it mean to have a tool and a technology that is so anthropomorphic that it's questioning who's actually the creator in this whole process. And so I would just say that it's always about the concept, it's always about the commentary that the artist is looking to have at that moment in time.
For sure, I think that's a great observation. And speaking about tools, so the tools that we always hear about, I think a lot of them are software tools, different programs. So Vishal, maybe you can go a little bit more into the hardware because I'm really curious to hear about that, and it's a little bit more unusual.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I'm not by any means an expert in hardware, but just like whistle stop tour. Obviously, you had like microprocessors, you then had like transistors, and then all of that led to things like the CPU, and then after the CPU you had the GPU, and there was always these ceilings that were limiting the type of compute and the type of output that humans could generate. So the CPU could not do what the GPU did, and suddenly the GPU unlocked a whole bunch of a different way of computing and processing information that allowed people to train machine learning models. But then around sort of like 2018, we started to see these neural processing units, these NPUs, start to enter the ecosystem, and this took things this raised the ceiling even further, because then suddenly you were able to run deep neural networks on device in real time without having to do this using a GPU. And so what we've seen over the last sort of 5 years is a huge breakthrough in neural processing units. And we are actually using NPUs, and we're using a TPU inside of the camera. And what those NPUs and TPUs allow us to do is to take deep learning models and deploy them on the camera to perform a certain task. And that task that we're using them currently is to do things like color correction and changing colors. Like, for instance, I'm just going to change the color now, but you should be able to see my colors just change there. And now I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to do that again, and I'm going to do that again. And so we're actually using deep learning. We're running AI inference to change those colors, as you can see. And that's happening on the camera. That's happening using the TPUs and the NPUs on the camera. Now, this TPU and NPU capabilities is increasing every single year. So Jensen at CES unveiled a hardware that's capable of running 50 trillion operations per second. And what this means is that in the future, we will have, and we already sort of do have the hardware, but we'll have hardware that's able to run different type of AI models, stable diffusion models on the edge. If back in 2023, it wasn't really possible to run stable diffusion models or generative adversarial networks, GANs, on a local device. You'd really need to like spin up a cluster of GPUs in the cloud to run the models. Now it's getting possible to be able to run diffusion models and GANs, like adversarial networks, on device. That will raise the ceiling even further. So what you have is you'll have hardware at your disposal that will allow you to rapidly prototype creative outputs in real time without having to use a cloud computer. Now, you may still want to use a cloud computer to do those things, because actually generating video on the fly is computationally very expensive. And actually, it's probably better architecturally to run those models in the cloud. However, maybe you don't have good internet connection, or maybe you actually just maybe there's more creative constraints that come from the fact that you have a device that is able to do the local processing, and that actually produces a slightly different artistic outcome than having it in the cloud. So I think that the main takeaway from my spiel is that there are always these breakthroughs in hardware that allow certain technologies to run locally. And we're going to start seeing much more of that between now and the end of the decade. And that's going to enable some very interesting local edge-based processing to happen, as well as cloud-based.
Super interesting. Yeah, I'm very curious to see your camera in action. Actually, not sure when it's going to be available for more general public to test, or for the artists to test. But I think it could be lots of fun.
We're ramping up production right now, and so we've got a massive wait list, but we are ramping up production to sort of satisfy that demand. And we're always interested in speaking with artists who want to use the camera for creative outputs, and we're thinking about putting a program together where we can potentially even sponsor some work by artists. So that's TBD. There's like no promises in relation to that, but yeah, we're ramping up production right now, and cameras will be more readily available.
Brilliant. Sasha, I'm going back to you. So I was thinking, so we're speaking about tools. I think we should have quite a few artists listening to us now. So I would be curious to hear what tools you are using and which tools you think work nicely as a kind of collaboration or collaborator for the works I'm also curious to hear what you think about Vishal Scanler and what is the potential for the tools like that for the artists.
Yeah. Well, no, I was listening very intently, Vishal, to your description, and that was a very cool demo. I'm certainly really excited to hopefully get my hands on one soon too. But yeah, I mean, there's so many opportunities out there and platforms and interfaces. And again, I think, like, for me, it really has been effective to sort of pick and choose and almost like collage them together, almost like, have, an array of different potential collaborators, different platforms that I can go and sort of, utilize for maybe a piece of a project here, a piece of a project there. Some of them are, purpose built for art. A lot of them aren't. And it's sort of a matter of just, using tools and kind of figuring out how to bend them to your will in a way. And I mean, to me, again, that's like very much, of a piece with how artists have always, kind of built their studios and outfitted their, their creative spaces with a mix of things that are maybe created for fine art, but also pulling in found objects and things that are maybe made for completely different for completely different purposes. So, I mean, for example, I've been playing quite a lot over the past few years with using AI in combination with voice and with music. A lot of my work, like I mentioned before, is multimodal. So there's works that I've done that really are like palimpsest, where there's a layer of generative text and then visual and then spoken word and then generative music, and really almost thinking of a poem's text as the libretto for more of an expansive multimedia experience. And so one of the things that really kind of tantalized me from the start was, how can I, as someone who has done a lot of performance and readings as a poet, how could I potentially use machine learning and AI as a collaborator to actually help me perform my poems, not just write them, but actually kind of bring them into the mix in terms of performing and presenting and sharing these poems in other ways. So I, started by, going back through my archives of recordings for my audiobooks and for, various performances that I've done over the years, and using those audio files as training data, and then really just using off-the-shelf, voice reader tools and voice cloning tools and things that are really just sort of meant for, podcasters or advertisers and, that sort of thing. But using those kinds of tools to create kind of an array or a choir of voice clones who are trained on different aspects of my work, maybe have, different sort of inflections or intonations, who I can kind of call on and task with sort of helping give voice to our transhuman collaborations. And also sort of using them in concert with things like Google Translate. I mean, these very sort of basic tools, but, pulling that into the mix to then help me not just sort of perform in my own tongue, but also potentially to, to task them with performing a poem that we've written, but performing it in my mother's Mongolian dialect, which I don't speak very well, but I would like to be able to sort of, sort of see some of these poems through that lens. So using AI tools to then in real time translate, into another voice, into another dialect, into another language. And again, those are very simple tools like neural readers and natural readers and things like that, again, are really meant for commercial purposes. So I think, it's really a matter of just sort of, again, like Vishal said, when you have a concept, it becomes much easier, I think, to sort of then assemble or visualize the array of tools that you might need and sort of really build a purposeful sort of studio for yourself that, may involve, various modalities for artificial intelligence. So I know you asked about like specifics. So I've been doing a lot lately with Gemini and kind of working closely with Google and really kind of looking at how I can utilize some of the features of the Gemini interface to sort of help me bring in lots of contextual information and think about, using it not just to write creatively, but also how can it help me sort of become a little bit more efficient as an artist who's responding to a lot of, for example, interviews and things like that, or an artist who has a lot of research notes and wants to be able to kind of keep things organized and just, make sure that I'm set up so that the thoughts that, are occurring to me in the moment don't just disappear, into thin air, but are always sort of there in the system and available. So I'm using it for a lot of things that don't necessarily have to do with artistic output, but it's about, keeping myself really inspired, keeping my information in places where it's going to be useful to me, helping me become better at answering a lot of the interview questions that I might receive again and again. And I always find, being in an interview, being in a panel discussion, receiving media requests from journalists, to me, that's always very interesting too, as part of my practice, a challenge to sort of think deeper about an aspect of what I'm doing. And so having, these prompt libraries or these sets of data or these bespoke models that are really looking at different aspects of my practice, from generating poetry to answering interview questions to translating and all that, really kind of helps me go deeper and still sort of be very specific and intentional about what I'm doing. I always like to also give a shout out to a specific platform that I've been working with for a long time now, a platform called Sudowrite, which is a really incredible tool that I would say is sort of like a corollary of things like Midjourney and DALL-E, but for writers specifically, and is really sort of built on large language models and is basically an environment that utilizes artificial intelligence to sort of give writers sort of turbocharged tools to write essays, to write poems, to write, really anything you can think of. But they have a really sort of incredible interface that, goes from the very bare bones to the extremely elaborate. And you can sort of, pick and choose how you want to put things together. But it's a really incredible space that allows you to play with language the way that something like a Photoshop would allow you to sort of, tweak an image. You can sort of use AI to tweak a plot line, tweak a character, as it's being built, to, help you sort of take, a plot summary and then think about different variations on it, for example. So there's lots of different ways that you can use it, but I love what they're doing, and have used that tool to sort of introduce a lot of fellow writers to AI in a way that I think really makes it clear why it can be a useful collaborator, like how it can actually really do something that augments and complements your imagination, doesn't replace it, doesn't sort of make you irrelevant, but really sort of gives you the ability to take your own work into really kind of exciting and unexpected directions while really still maintaining a lot of creative control over it. So Sudowrite's a great one. There's so many more, but yeah. That's sort of
these are great examples, and I think would be very useful for someone who is just starting or who is continuously working in this space. I also wanted to actually go a little bit away from the tools to the creative output, because we're here still mostly about art, and we want to see art and experience art and to feel art. And so with that, I wanted to just ask both of you. So Sasha, maybe you can share which art projects you're working on right now. What are you working on right now? What are your plans for 2025? And for Vishal, I was curious if you already have some artists working with your tool, what has been the experience, and what do you anticipate to happen in 2025? Maybe more artist collaborations, or how artists can get involved, things like that.
Yeah. There's so much going on, but one of the things that I'm really sort of excited about, which I think is relevant to this conversation about outputs and all that. Well, to take a step back, in 2021, I actually published a collection of poems that was co-written by me and my AI alter ego. And that sort of has become a little bit of a touchstone for me in a lot of my practice. It's a compendium of poems that I'd been writing about my relationship to technology, but also then using those poems, using my own work to prompt new AI-powered poems. And so all those are kind of in concert with each other in the book. And one of the things I've been thinking about over the years since that came out is how to continue sort of allowing this transhuman collection to evolve and adapt as the underlying tools sort of begin to change. And, as old models that I used to create those poems obsolesce and as new tools become available, how might that change kind of the direction of this project? How might it sort of rewrite the poems that have already been written? So one of the things I'm really sort of interested in now is kind of building an infinitely generative version of that book that really kind of takes a very sort of expansive compendium of synthetic poetry as the training set, and kind of using that to enable a reader to come back to the text, and every single time they come back to it, they're reading something a little bit different, or to sort of have a fresh experience of the collection that is sort of adapting in real time, evolving in real time, just as AI and the underlying models are always evolving in real time. So in that case, I'm sort of looking at it sort of through the lens of, I really consider myself a poet who doesn't just write poems, but also, a poet who writes poets. And so I really consider this sort of a project where I'm writing this collaborative poet who, we've been working together for years. We've been sort of workshopping together, learning more and more about this third voice that we, together are able to sort of conjure or evoke, and then figuring out how to kind of let it off the leash a little bit and become, increasingly its own sort of emergent poetic persona. And so that really involves a lot of, not just output, but it requires like a lot of my creative energy going towards developing more and more data, developing synthetic poetry, working together with AI to write and rewrite examples of variations of poems that are sort of an ideal version of what I would love to see this system outputting in the end. And so for me, the output here is not necessarily the final sort of generative iterations. The output for me, I think, is really this synthetic body of work that is going to be able to kind of power this infinite book and enable it to kind of rewrite itself over time. And so for me, it's like an interesting conceptual project that really kind of, again, brings up some of the issues we were talking about earlier about what does it mean to be an artist using AI? What is our output? What is our role? What is the artwork? Is the artwork the final kind of thing that you hang on a wall or that you publish in a bookstore? Or is the artwork the training data set? Or is it the process and the systems and sort of the parameters? Is it conceptual? Is it, the object that comes out at the end? So on all those levels, this kind of a project, which is a longer term project, is really enabling me to kind of continue to think about those things, which I find really fascinating. And at the same time, at the end of the day, to write poetry and to just, have these words to kind of play with in lots of ways. So it's been really a meaningful project. And I think one that hopefully is going to allow me to keep learning and keep sort of keep refreshing my understanding of what's possible with these tools, which is also, I think, a big challenge for artists working with AI. We know that there's just sort of endless, updates and iterations, and, you can become very fluent in a system one day and then the rules change the next day. And so I think this also is allowing me to sort of integrate that ongoing trajectory of the technology into the project itself and sort of say, well, the tools, the interfaces, the models are always going to be a little bit different from day to day. So how can I sort of look at the data set kind of as this kernel, this like the soul of the project that can be sort of transported from system to system or from iteration to iteration, and look at then what happens as a result. How does the output vary? So yeah, in all those ways, that's been sort of an interesting project that I'm really happy to be spending my time and my focus on.
This sounds super interesting. Do you have any timeline on when this is going to be released? What's your plan?
I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping to have some sort of at least some teasers and kind of bits and pieces from it filtering out like throughout the year. And I've actually started to sort of play with taking some of the synthetic data that I'm using for this training set and kind of present them as discrete projects. So for example, there's a few poems in my 2021 collection that for me felt like a good kind of starting place for this. And I've been honing in on, for example, taking one or two of those poems and working with my AI collaborator to rewrite the poem, not just once or twice, but 100 times, and then look at ways of presenting the variations of those poems that really sort of shed light on how nuanced changes in the prompts and parameters can sort of lead to very different outcomes. But also it kind of allows me to kind of dig deeper into where the echoes and the resonances are, and where the system is really meaningfully iterating on an idea. So there's a couple examples of that I think will be released over the course of this year. And then, I'll continue working on kind of this larger scale iteration over time, but I'll keep you posted.
Brilliant. Yeah, I cannot wait to experience it. Great. Vishal, please share your plans for 2025. And yeah, we haven't, I don't think you mentioned the collaborations with the artists yet. So we'd be curious to hear if they already exist.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the hard work of actually building a camera from scratch was occupying a lot of our capacity over the last 3 years. So like we had to like build the electronics, we had to build the physical design of the product, we had to build the algorithms and the software. So like all of that development over the last 3 years was very, very sort of took up all of our headspace. Now we're starting to look at the next chapter of this device. And what we are able to do is like, you're not only able to just capture photos and videos like a regular camera, but recently we've integrated a large language model into the camera where you can essentially speak to it and say, hey, can you record a photo? Can you take a video of 10 seconds or 30 seconds? Can you change the color to look like this and do this? And so we've added this active intelligence into the device that allows, we believe actually for the first time ever in the mirrorless camera industry, that allows the user, the artist, to have a dialogue with the camera, which is a very interesting concept. And not just that, not only will it have this sort of intelligence, this active participation, this active intelligence that acts as a participant in your creative process, but we're also connecting the output of the camera directly to generation tools. So we've got an integration with Runway that we've been testing, all just sort of rapid prototyping. But what you could essentially do is take a photo with the camera, a photo of reality, and then you can send that photo to Runway with a prompt, and Runway will then generate a video based off the input photo and prompt. And what that means is that you can start to reimagine, or you can start to draw a line between reality and generation seamlessly inside of the camera, which is also pretty wild. And so Sasha, you spoke about this before, but like there's a big reluctance by artists when it comes to like using AI tools. You would typically hear people, either scoff at the idea of AI, or they will say things like, "Oh, it looks kind of a bit trashy. It doesn't look very nice," or it's people are sort of just like either scared of it or just like not interested in using it, and can sometimes get actually a bit upset by AI. But I find that and I find that extremely ironic in a lot of cases, because like if you rewind like a century to when the camera was first being released, like the first consumer cameras were being released, the types of people that were angry and annoyed by the camera were the purists, right? These were the purists that liked 19th century paintings. They liked how the paintings of reality were done. And you had people that were really reluctant of the idea of a camera. They actually scoffed at some of the Bauhaus artists that were using the camera as a tool for creative output. And so I find it ironic that there are people who scoff at the idea of generative tools. But what we're really interested in 2025 is to work with artists that see the potential of generative AI and how they can actually create a bridge between reality and generation, and then produce interesting outputs that are novel and interesting and have never been done before. And so by doing these experiments with the large language model, integrating it into the camera, by doing these experiments with generative video tools, we actually are situating the camera to embrace this technology, not to reject this technology, not to scoff at this technology, not to say that this technology is taking away our creativity. In fact, I see this technology as opening up creative possibilities that may have not been possible before. I see this technology as a way of dropping and reducing the barriers to entry to visual effects, because that can be a very expensive in terms of cost, but also in terms of time. It can be a very expensive endeavor to do visual effects. So working with these tools to open up and creative possibilities and reduce the barriers is something where I see this going, and we want to work with artists that want to use this as a tool. But to come back to Sasha, I'm sure artists all the time are inundated with all these different tools, right? Which tool do you choose? Which tool should you either experiment with and then actually invest time and effort in developing further? Or maybe you just experiment with the tool for 1 or 2 months and then you say, actually, I don't need to use that tool. So we want to work with creatives who want to experiment with what we're building. There's no obligation for them to use it or to actually continue using it if they don't like it. That's also part of the discussion and the relationship that we need to have with artists, which is that, hey, this is a new tool. We're not saying that you have to use this. We're not saying that this is actually even appropriate for the vision that you have of the type of art that you want to make in the future. But at least experiment with it and see what you can do. And naturally, I think we will find people who will gravitate towards what we're trying to do. And I think we should just then double down on those people and work with them so that they can actually demonstrate to our community and the rest of the world what's actually possible when you build a bridge between reality and generation with a novel AI native camera that's never been built before. So for us, yeah, we're really interested. I think now that we've got a lot of the development headache out of the way, we're really interested in putting this technology into the hands of people that want to experiment with it, and then also are willing to actually run with it once they believe that it's suitable for this type of work that they want to be doing in the future.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I really think, there's so much potential for this. And just looking at the numbers of how many people are watching the stream, I see they're only increasing. I see 724 right now. So there is so much interest into these tools, and essentially not only the tools, but what actually the technology can do and how it's becoming the part of our lives now, of everyday lives. How many of us are using ChatGPT for just daily activities now? Something that I haven't used that much even a year ago, but now I cannot imagine my life without ChatGPT, really, or I can, but it would be much more sad. So yeah, these tools are becoming a part of us. All right. Well, as we're coming close to 1 hour, it's been really fascinating to hear from both of you. maybe we can close up with some final thoughts. And again, as I think there are some artists that are watching us today, or just people who are interested in experimenting with this technology, any advice from both of you, just a very, very quick advice of where someone should start, or in general, what would be a very quick advice for someone who is experimenting in the field?
Sasha, go ahead. I feel like you've been really in the weeds of a lot of technologies at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I mean, where to begin? I think there's so many, there are a lot of platforms, I think, that are really doing a good job of trying to sort of contextualize a lot of AI art and sort of tell the story of, how and when and why this movement has really sort of begun, and also kind of look backwards a little bit and talk about the roots of today's AI in some of the work that was being done by pioneering computational artists decades ago. So I mean, I think a good place to look, and what's been inspiring for me, is to kind of look at digital art curators. I mean, Elena, you're obviously a wonderful example of this. There are a handful of digital art curators who've been really sort of instrumental in telling stories about artists who are collaborating with artificial intelligence. I mean, I mentioned her before, but Christiane Paul comes to mind as someone who's really been helpful in my own head, sort of thinking about what I'm doing within a larger discourse. So I would say doing some research, looking at exhibitions maybe that are on these themes, reading some of the critical conversation around them is a really good way for artists to sort of understand some of the history as well as the future, and think about kind of what's at stake here, who the predecessors have been, kind of get to know the history of this art form. Even though it feels very emergent, there are some really interesting stories to be told over the past few decades of really like how it's come to be. So I feel like that's a good place to start. And I think there's collections and platforms. Fellowship is one that comes to mind, that are really kind of focusing in a very thoughtful way on artists who are collaborating with artificial intelligence, with machine learning in very different ways, very different approaches. But I think kind of keying into platforms like that are really kind of making this the heart and soul of what they do is, again, a really kind of great place to get grounded in sort of the best of what's being done. People who are really sort of using tools in really extraordinary and unique and meaningful ways, and creating very, very different kinds of art, and also who speak, incredibly persuasively and powerfully about why they want to collaborate with machinic systems in this way. So I don't know, for me, I think there's sort of an endless fountain of inspiration from fellow artists, from fellow, peers in the community who are also in the thick of it, and just sort of staying tuned to what they're doing in places like Twitter or X, kind of using social media platforms as a way to kind of glimpse into their thought processes, their studios. All of that has also, I think, been really important. There's a lot of digital artists who really see, our practices as kind of extending into this global kind of decentralized movement that really, involves a lot of conversation online and platforms like this as well. So I don't know, I think participating in that way, participating in this kind of decentralized community of artists is a really, really important thing to do as well. Just kind of plugging into what's going on here. You will learn a lot about new tools, about new approaches, about, artworks that are particularly important in different ways. It's just, I think, a great way to kind of stay in tune with what's happening around the world.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Sasha. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say, just get started. Just start experimenting. And also coming back to Sasha, like maybe be a bit intentional about why you'd want to use AI in as a tool. But also it really depends on what type of creator you are. Like if you are a text-based creator, or if you are a video-based creator, or a photo-based creator, or like it sort of depends what type of artist you are and the medium and what tool that will determine what tool you're going to use. That doesn't mean you need to restrict yourself necessarily. But because there's so many tools, there's never been a better time to just start, really. Just dip your toes in it and start experimenting. And then, as Sasha says, you'll gravitate towards people and communities that resonate with you, and you take it from there.
Absolutely. What a great advice. I would also suggest follow both Sasha and Vishal to keep yourself updated and to know what's going on. And yeah, I would just follow them and see everything that they're working on. And I'm sure you will get a lot more information about creativity and AI and what you can do in the space. Also, of course, follow LiveArt and stay tuned about our AI agent. I think that's going to be fun and interesting to use because we have so much data on the art market. Well, thank you so much both for being here today. I think it was an amazing conversation. I think we should speak more about creativity and AI because there are so many topics that we really haven't covered, and yeah, I would love to talk about them in the future. And we try to do these webinars weekly, so please join us for the future events. And thank you so much, and see you both soon.